Picture this. You're a nightclub singer. The spotlight is yours. The crowd is loving it. And then, in a single moment, everything changes. Now you're on the run, not hiding in a mansion, not escaping to another country, but living undercover in a quiet convent, surrounded by nuns who wake up before sunrise and expect complete silence. Yeah, this movie should not have worked. And yet, Sister Act didn't just work. It became one of the most iconic comedies of the 90s. With Whoopi Goldberg leading the charge as Dolores Van Cartier, the film delivered unforgettable music, chaotic energy, and a story that somehow turned choir practice into pure entertainment. But what happened behind the scenes? That's where things get even crazy. Because from last-minute casting changes, to secret rewrites, to real-life inspirations you probably never knew about, this movie has a history just as entertaining as the story itself. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up! Number 1. Before Whoopi Goldberg stepped into the role, the entire film was being built around someone else. The original vision, a completely different tone, a different style of humor, and a different lead actress. But when that version didn't come together, everything had to change, fast. The script was rewritten, the character was reshaped, and suddenly the project was wide open. That's when Whoopi Goldberg entered the picture, and instead of trying to fit the original mold, she redefined it. And honestly, that change is probably the reason the movie became a hit. Number 2. It sounds like pure fiction, but part of the idea actually comes from real life. There was a well-known actress who walked away from Hollywood at the peak of her career to live a completely different life in a religious community. That unexpected shift, from fame to simplicity, sparked the creative idea behind the film. But instead of a peaceful transition, the movie flips it into something chaotic and unpredictable, which makes the story feel both grounded and completely wild at the same time. And hey, if you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Number 3. This is where things get risky. Imagine showing up to set, and the scene you're supposed to film hasn't even been fully written yet. That actually happened. The production moved forward while writers were still working behind the scenes, trying to shape the story in real time. Dialogue changed, scenes evolved, and actors had to adapt quickly. At one point, additional creative help was brought in quietly to polish lines and improve the humor, especially for the main character. It was messy, but somehow it worked. Number 4. The cheerful, high-energy vibe of one of the film's most lovable characters didn't come out of nowhere. It was inspired by a real television host known for being incredibly upbeat, almost too upbeat. That energy became the blueprint. The result? A character who feels larger than life, constantly positive, and impossible to ignore. And that contrast adds a whole new layer to the film's dynamic. Number 5. Here's something most viewers never notice. One of the film's most emotional musical moments isn't actually sung by the actress you see on screen. A professional vocalist stepped in behind the scenes to deliver those powerful notes. But at the same time, the lead performance? That voice is completely real. Whoopi Goldberg trained to perform her own musical parts, bringing authenticity to every scene. So what you get is a mix of performance and precision, and that's why the music feels so strong. Number 6. This one sounds unbelievable. The lead actress of a major film didn't promote it at all. No interviews, no press tour, no big marketing push from the star. Under normal circumstances, that could hurt a movie. But in this case, it didn't matter, because audiences connected with the film instantly, and word of mouth did the rest. Number 7. Behind the scenes, the energy of this movie wasn't just professional, it was chaotic in the best way possible. You have to remember, this wasn't a quiet, serious set. It was a group of actors playing nuns, while filming a high-energy musical comedy. That alone created a strange and hilarious atmosphere. Some of the cast didn't even bother changing out a costume between takes. So imagine this, you're just a regular person going about your day, and suddenly you see a group of nuns laughing, joking, and acting completely out of character. That kind of thing actually happened during filming, and it didn't stop there. The cast bonded quickly, and that chemistry spilled into everything, from rehearsals to downtime. There was a sense that everyone knew they were part of something unusual, and instead of resisting it, they leaned all the way in. That's why the interactions on screen feel so natural, because they weren't just acting like a group, they actually felt like one. And when a cast genuinely enjoys working together, you can feel it through the screen, even decades later.
Number 8.
When Sister Act hit theaters, it didn't just succeed, it shifted the entire trajectory of Whoopi Goldberg's career. Before this, she was already respected, already known. But what about after this? She became something else entirely, a box office powerhouse, the kind of star studios build projects around. And with that success came leverage. Suddenly, she wasn't just accepting roles, she was influencing decisions, choosing projects more strategically, negotiating from a position of strength. That's a major turning point for any actor, because there's a difference between being successful and having control. And this film gave her that control. It proved that a movie led by her could dominate globally, and Hollywood pays very close attention to that kind of result. Number 9. Let's be honest for a second. On paper, the idea sounds strange. Take well-known songs, put them in a choir setting, and have them performed by nuns. That could have gone very wrong. Like awkward, disconnected, or even unintentionally funny for the wrong reasons. But instead, it became one of the film's biggest strengths. Why? Because the music wasn't just added, it was reinvented. Each song was carefully transformed to match the energy of the story. The arrangements gave them a completely new identity, while still keeping what made them recognizable. And here's the key detail. The music actually moves the story forward. It's not just there for entertainment. It shows growth, confidence, and transformation. So instead of feeling like random performances, each moment builds on the last. And by the time you reach the big finale, it feels earned. That's why people still remember the music today. Number 10. Now this is where things get interesting. One of the actors in Sister Act had a year that perfectly shows how unpredictable Hollywood can be. In one film, they're part of a fun, lighthearted comedy filled with music and humor. In another, they're involved in something much more intense and serious. Two completely different tones. Two completely different audiences, released around the same time. That kind of contrast isn't easy to pull off, but it highlights something important. Great actors aren't limited to one style. They can move between worlds and still deliver. And in a way, that contrast makes their performance in Sister Act even more impressive, because it shows range. Number 11. Most films come and go. They release, they succeed, or don't. And that's it. But Sister Act didn't follow that pattern. It expanded. The story found a second life, not on screen, but on stage. Turning a movie into a live production is always risky. What works in film doesn't always translate to a stage environment. But in this case, it worked. The music, the characters, the energy. It all adapted in a way that felt fresh while still staying true to the original spirit. And here's the important part. It introduced the story to a completely new audience. People who may have never seen the movie experienced it for the first time in a totally different format. That's rare, and it's a sign that the foundation of the story is strong enough to evolve. Number 12. If you watch closely, you might notice something. Not every detail in the film matches real-world accuracy. But here's the thing, that was never the goal. The movie isn't trying to be a documentary, it's trying to entertain. And sometimes that means bending reality just enough to make the story more fun, more engaging, and more accessible. Because if everything were completely accurate, you'd lose some of the magic. So instead, the film chooses energy over precision. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it work. Number 13. When the movie was first released, expectations were moderate. It wasn't positioned as a massive blockbuster. But then something unexpected happened. People started talking about it. Not because of marketing, not because of hype, but because they genuinely enjoyed it. And that kind of reaction spreads fast. Audience after audience showed up, and the numbers kept climbing. Before long, it had turned into a major success story. And it didn't stop there. When did it hit home viewing? It reached an even bigger audience. At that point, it wasn't just a movie, it was everywhere. Number 14. Success attracts attention, and sometimes not the good kind. After the film became widely known, several individuals came forward claiming similarities between the film and their own ideas. This led to legal challenges. Now, this kind of situation isn't uncommon in the entertainment world, especially when a project becomes highly visible. But here's what matters. The film held its ground, and ultimately, it remained one of the defining comedies of its time. In a strange way, even the challenges reinforced just how impactful the movie had become. Number 15. Let's break it down. A performer in danger, hidden in a convent, who then becomes the center of attention again. Logically, it doesn't hold up, but that's exactly why it works. Because the movie doesn't try to justify every detail. Instead, it leans into the absurdity. It says, yes, this is unlikely. Now enjoy the ride. And that confidence allows the audience to relax and go along with it. Sometimes the best stories aren't the most realistic ones. They're the ones that fully commit to their own idea. Number 16. Those energetic choir scenes might look effortless. But what about behind the scenes? They were anything but. Every movement had to be timed. Every vocal moment had to align. Every reaction had to feel natural. That takes practice. A lot of it. The cast had to work together like a real group, not just individuals performing separately. And that's what makes those scenes stand out. They feel cohesive, alive, like something is actually happening in real time. Number 17. Over time, Sister Act didn't just remain popular, it became recognizable. Even people who haven't watched the full movie often know parts of it. The music, the concept, the energy. That kind of recognition doesn't happen by accident. It happens when something connects on a deeper level. And once it reaches that point, it sticks. Number 18. Blending genres in a movie sounds easy, but it's actually one of the hardest things to get right. Think about it. If a film leans too much into comedy, the emotional moments can feel weak or forced. If it focuses too much on drama, the fun disappears. And if the music doesn't fit naturally into the story, it can feel like everything just stops for a performance. That's usually where films fall apart. But Sister Act did something different. It didn't treat comedy, music, and emotion as separate pieces. It wove them together. The humor flows directly into the music. The music reflects character growth, and the emotional moments feel earned because of everything that came before them. Nothing feels out of place. And here's where it gets even smarter. The film constantly shifts its tone just enough to keep your brain engaged. Right when you're settling into a funny moment, it introduces heart. Right when things feel calm, it brings in energy. Right when you expect one direction, it pivots. That constant movement keeps the audience from getting bored. You're always slightly surprised by what comes next. And that's a huge part of retention, because when a movie becomes predictable, people mentally check out. But when does it keep evolving? You stay locked in. That's exactly what this film does. It doesn't just mix genres, it balances them in a way that feels effortless, even though it definitely wasn't. Number 19. Alright, real quick, before we hit the final fact, let me ask you something. How many times have you started a video and clicked away halfway through? Exactly, but you're still here, which means something about this story is working for you. Maybe it's the nostalgia, maybe it's the behind-the-scenes chaos, or maybe it's realizing that this movie is way deeper than it first appears. Whatever it is, you made it this far. So here's the deal. If you've enjoyed even one of these facts, take a second to hit like. And if you want more breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the surface and dig into what really made these films work, then subscribe, because this is just the beginning. There are a lot more stories like this one, and they only get better from here. Alright, let's finish this strong. Number 20. Here's the real question every movie faces over time. Does it still work? Not just as a memory, not just as nostalgia, but as an actual experience today. Because a lot of films don't pass that test. Styles change, pacing changes, audience expectations evolve. What once felt fresh can start to feel outdated, but somehow Sister Act avoided that. And the reason is simple, but powerful. It focuses on things that don't expire. Character, energy, transformation, connection. Those elements don't depend on trends. They don't rely on special effects or timing specific to a certain era. They rely on something deeper, and that's why new audiences can watch it today and still enjoy it. Not because it's old, but because it still feels alive. The humor still lands, the music still hits, the journey still makes sense, and maybe most importantly, the feeling it gives you at the end, that hasn't changed. It's still uplifting, still satisfying, still memorable, and that's rare, because staying relevant for a moment is easy. But staying relevant for decades? That's something only a few films manage to do, and this is one of them. Bonus. If you strip everything away, the music, the comedy, the setting, what you're left with is something surprisingly simple, but incredibly powerful. Transformation. At the beginning of the story, Dolores Van Cartier is living one kind of life. Fast-paced, loud, centered around attention, performance, and survival. She knows how to stand out. She knows how to control a room. But then, everything changes. She's thrown into a world that operates on the complete opposite rules. Silence instead of noise. Discipline instead of freedom. Structure instead of improvisation. And at first, she doesn't belong there. Not even a little. You can feel that tension immediately. The clash between who she is and where she's been placed. And that's what hooks the audience. Because we've all experienced that feeling in some way, being dropped into an environment where nothing feels familiar, where you don't quite fit, where everything about you feels out of place. But here's where the story does something smart. It doesn't just show her trying to escape that world. It shows her slowly changing it. Not in one big moment, not in a dramatic speech, but step by step through music, through energy, through personality. She brings something new into that space, and at first, it disrupts everything. But then, something unexpected happens. The people around her start to respond. They grow more confident, more expressive, more alive. And suddenly, that quiet, structured environment starts to evolve into something vibrant and full of life. But here's the key detail most people overlook. It's not just her changing the world. The world is changing her too. She begins to slow down, to listen, to connect in ways she never had before. And without even realizing it, she's no longer the same person she was at the beginning. That's the real story. Not just adaptation, but mutual transformation. And that's why it resonates so strongly. Because it reflects something real. Sometimes growth doesn't come from staying in your comfort zone. It comes from being thrown into something completely unfamiliar and finding a way to make it work, to influence it, and to be influenced by it. That balance, that exchange, is what gives the story its emotional weight. And it's also what gives it replay value. Because even after all the jokes, all the music, and all the memorable moments, that core idea stays with you. And that's why, years later, people still come back to this film. Not just because it's fun, but because deep down, it feels meaningful. If this video surprised you even once, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives that turn movies you love into stories you've never heard before.